Hello everybody, this is FIDE Master Dalton Perrine, and I welcome you to this Chess Openings 101 Intro to the Benko Gambit video course here today. Throughout this four-part video course, I'm going to be helping you to better understand the Benko Gambit, the main themes and plans for both white and black in this opening, how to play the opening yourself, how to play against it, as well as different tactical tricks and different patterns you're going to want to memorize if you're going to play this opening or if you happen to be playing against this particular opening at some point in the future. The goal of this video course is for you to get better at this opening so that you can either play it yourself or so that you can know what to do against it if you happen to face it. And the better you understand this opening, its structures and plans, the better your results are going to be when you do happen to encounter this opening in your own games. Now, the progression of material through the video course is going to be as follows. The first video here that we have right now that you're watching is going to be a basic overview of the opening, as well as a brief history of it, and also looking at some brief game examples that we're going to kind of see some key ideas in. The second video is going to teach you how to play the opening yourself as black. The third video will teach you how to play against the opening if you're playing white. And the fourth and final video will introduce some puzzles to solve that revolve around different patterns in this particular opening. So let's first of all see the basic opening moves that are going to be played in order to reach the Benko Gambit opening setup. The game begins with d4. It is a d4, 1d4 opening. Knight f6, c4, c5, d5. And different from another video that we also have created in the past, the Benoni defense is the opening that goes with e6, but the Benko Gambit goes with the move b5. This is the gambit where black is sacrificing a pawn at the moment and not being able to immediately regain the pawn. White will usually accept the pawn. Black will sacrifice or essentially offer a trade of pawns on a6. Pawn takes, bishop takes. So this is the start of the Benko Gambit opening that we're going to be looking at throughout this video course. Now the Benko Gambit, which is also known as the Volga Gambit, it was first used in the year 1936, and later on, beginning in the late 1960s, this opening idea was promoted by Hungarian-American Grandmaster Pal Benko. He's the one that provided many new suggestions, and he published a book called The Benko Gambit in 1974. So that's kind of where the name for the opening kind of focused on primarily Pal Benko making the Benko Gambit. Now, many of the world's strongest players have definitely used this opening at one time or another, including former world champions such as Viswanathan Anand, Garry Kasparov, Veselin Topalov, and Mikhail Tal. Also, aside from those world champions, other grandmasters such as Vasily Ivanchuk, Michael Adams, Alexei Shirov, Boris Gelfand, different very strong grandmasters have played this opening from time to time in the past for sure. It is a very popular opening, especially at the club level, where it's considered to offer black good practical chances of playing for a win. So if you like to play for a win, if you don't like to play for drawish positions, the Benko Gambit is the opening for you. So from this opening position here, we can already see a couple of advantages for both sides of the board. Within the first 5 moves or so here, white has gained a space advantage due to having advanced his d-pawn over into black's half of the board. And white also has a 1-pawn material lead. White does have 7 pawns, black has 6 pawns, so white is up a pawn. That is the nature of gambits. Usually the one that's doing the gambit is going to be down material. Now, on the other hand, despite being down a pawn and maybe slightly behind on space in the center, the main advantage for black at the moment is the fact that black has gained a 2-piece development lead in the meantime because only all 5 moves so far from white have all been pawn moves. White has not developed a piece. Black, on the other hand, has 2 pieces developed, and that is a 2-piece development lead here. So there are definitely pluses and minuses to this opening that have to be understood in order to play it comfortably for both white and black. Now, before we look at specific moves that follow from here, one of the most important things to take note of from black's perspective, so we'll look at black's side of the board here real quick. One of the most important things to take note of from black's perspective is the type of pawn sacrifice or gambit that this opening involves. Most opening gambits are used to open up central lines or central files, and usually they're designed to create a quick attack against the opponent's king. Usually those gambits, you're kind of trying to win the game quickly, you're trying to blow your opponent off the board, and if that doesn't succeed, then usually you're going to lose the game. Now, instead of the other types of gambits, in this particular gambit, black has sacrificed a pawn on the queen side rather than in the center. So this means that black's open lines in this opening, they happen to be on the half open A or half open B and A files in this position. Instead in this opening, black is sacrificed on the queen side rather than the center. So that means that the queen side is generally where black is going to focus on for the most part, going into the middle, continuing in the opening and going into the middle game. Because black will focus on the queen side primarily, white is usually instead going to focus mainly on the king side, away from black's open lines that he has on the queen side. Usually, white will try to advance in the center in combination with the king side in order to attack, try to open up black's king, because black is usually going to castle king side for the most part in this opening as well. Now, this isn't always 100% the case, but it is a good general principle to keep in mind as you begin to learn the opening. If you're struggling with what part of the board to play on, black is the queen side, white is the king side primarily. So this main battle of king side play versus queen side play also helps both players to figure out how they're going to develop their pieces. For example, black in this situation is usually going to fianchetto his bishop on g7, similar to some Benoni defense lines. Black will fianchetto the bishop on g7 because from that square, the bishop will exert pressure on the queen side. That's just one example of how understanding how the opening works can help you to develop your pieces more efficiently. We'll also see other opening maneuvers or piece development schemes that black is going to employ, as well as how white can develop against when he's playing against this opening. Now, from this position on move number 6, right after black has captured the pawn back on a6 here, white has a couple of main moves that are available here. A lot of the times, white will play the moves knight c3, knight f3, or g3. No matter which option white plays, though, black is usually still going to continue with g6, bishop g7, and fianchetto that bishop very quickly here. If white goes knight c3, black will usually just continue g6. Sometimes black will throw in d6 first, but usually a quick g6 and bishop g7 is going to ensue. And again, if white plays knight f3, it's about the same thing, g6, bishop g7, and then d6 at some point. So this is pretty much the typical continuation from here. No matter which move white chooses, black will fianchetto, castle, and we're going to kind of also see in the future videos more specific explanation for the different setups that white and black can do. Now, in this particular video, we're going to look at two examples briefly, just to show how this opening can be played for white, and how this opening can also be played for black. The next two videos after this video are going to go more in depth on these ideas in the opening, so for now, we're just going to have brief comments on these two particular games. So this first game example we're going to look at is going to focus on showing how black can win with strong queenside play. So let's go ahead and put that game on the board here, and we're going to focus on this from black's point of view. So it starts off with the same opening moves, d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, b5, pawn takes a6, pawn takes, bishop takes, and in this particular case, white decides to go with the knight c3 route. Black plays d6, white plays knight f3, and black quickly fianchettos the bishop to g7 as well. g6, white decides to fianchetto his own bishop too. Bishop g7, bishop g2, castle, castle. So at this point, we can see that black has gotten a little bit of a lead in development, mainly because he's about to develop a new piece. It is his move to develop at this point. And he does that with the move knight to d7. So bishop is aiming towards the queen side. Usually black will put rooks on the A and B files to also aim towards the queen side. Usually the queen will go to b6 or a5 to also help. And a lot of times the knight will go to b6 to help attack maybe the d5 pawn as well as the c4 square. So let's see how this setup goes for black, and then in the next game we'll see the setup that white can employ. So white played queen c2, black played queen to b6, rook d1, rook to b8, so again shuffling everything towards the queen side. Rook to b1, trying to reinforce the b pawn, and also get off of the diagonal that the bishop is on. Knight to e8, and black is looking to reroute the knight a little bit so that he can look to put more. He's rerouting the knight essentially from the f6 square, which is more on the king side, towards the b5 square, which is more on the queen side. White plays bishop g5, trying to show that the e7 pawn is weak. Black does bring the queen back to d8 to protect it. Bishop f1, h6, kicking the bishop. Knight to c7, b3, knight to b6, attacking the d5 pawn. And white plays the move e4. Now, as we're going to see in the future, in the next video, focusing on black's different plans and things like that, this is actually an opening where, despite being down material, black is down a pawn because of the nature of a gambit. Despite being down material, black actually doesn't mind trading certain pieces, as we're going to see. The in-game is actually not too bad for the black player a lot of times in the Benko Gambit, mainly because it's not a gambit that, again, relies on attacking the king. It relies more so on just good open lines and play on the queen side. A lot of the times, black will be able to trade pieces and then win back one of the A or B pawns and then reach a better in-game as it goes along. So for that reason, black is okay with this trade. He's not moving away from the trade. He instead welcomes the trade of light square bishops. The rook takes back, queen to d7, rook to e1, king h7, king g2, and black now plays that move. One of the pawn breaks here in the center of the board, which is going to be able to put a little bit of extra pressure on white's center. White trades pawns, knight takes back. Now the knight has the d4 square, which would be nice to put the knight on at some point. Knight e2 to protect that square. And black now plays the move d5. He's looking to pretty much open up the center. And he might, he still has the pressure on the queen side, but he might also have some pressure on the king if the queen can reach the center. White played knight f4. Black trades on e4. Knight to d4. Again, there's some piece trades, but despite being down a pawn, black is okay with this. Because, again, white's extra pawn, whether you consider it the A or the B pawn, they're not doing a lot at the moment. They're not very far advanced, and black is going to look to keep it that way. White played a4. Black played queen to b7, setting up a pin, threatening a move like f5, attacking the pinned rook. And as we're going to see next move, after white breaks that pin, knight takes a4 is available, and white has now lost his extra pawn. Black is now even in material because the B pawn is pinned here. So now white doesn't even have the extra material, and black still has a lot of the same pressure on the queen side. White moved the rook. Black took an additional pawn, so now black is the one that's up material. There's a pin on the bishop. Knight c3. And pretty soon, black is simply going to try to use the c-pawn to win the game, doubling up on the second rank, attacking the knight, which is protecting, that's protecting the rook on e2. If white trades rooks, black will just take back with the pawn, threaten to promote, and also capture the knight. Instead, white traded or sacrificed the exchange on g7. There was a check. And then black simply traded rooks, checked. And after white moves his king, black pushes the pawn, black will promote, and black is going to win the knight and be up an entire rook here. So white ended up resigning in a position like this. So as we can see in this example, black simply powered through with his queenside play. He was able to use some opening of the center and some tactics on the queen side to win back one of his pawns, and eventually white never really got very much kingside play going, and black was able to win here. So let's see our next example, which is going to focus on white winning through that kingside play. So again, this opening video series and video course is focusing on both sides of the board. We're not being partial to white or partial to black. We're seeing how both sides of the board can play effectively with or against this opening. So let's see how white can play focusing on the king side. So same opening moves here. Everything's exactly the same. We're going to see another fianchetto of white's light square bishop. Black plays castle kingside. White also castles as well. Knight to d7. So pretty much the same exact 10 moves or so from both players compared to the previous game. But we're going to see the difference is that white is going to focus more on the king side. White plays h3, knight b6, knight to d2, knight to e8. Same rook b1 move just to get off of the diagonal. This is just a generally good multi-purpose move. Knight c8, b3, queen a5, bishop b2 to guard the knight. c4, white plays bishop a1. There's a trade. The knight takes back and attacks the queen. Knight comes into d4. Trade of rooks. Queen to c1. Black ends up trading off the bishop for the knight because it looks like black is able to win a pawn back. Black's idea here is if the knight takes, black will trade queens and then play rook to b1 and regain the piece, and then he'll be even in material. We did say earlier how if black's able to win his pawn back, it's usually a good thing for him. And especially if he can reach the endgame, it is a little bit better for him. Instead, though, white does not want to trade in this particular position. He wants to focus on that kingside play. So he played king h2, avoiding the back rank issues, and then queen h6. Now, all of a sudden, with this missing dark square bishop that is such an important piece for black in this opening, white is now looking to create checkmate threats along the diagonal here in the future. Knight f8, rook h4. White now threatens something like knight to b5, attacking the queen and opening up a discovered checkmate threat on g7. Queen b6. In this position now, white went ahead and played the move knight e4. Knight a4 would have also been pretty good, it seems like, threatening checkmate and attacking the queen. I don't see any reason not to play that either. White decided to go for knight e4, though, because after the move f6, white decides to sacrifice on f6, and essentially just powering through with the kingside play. King f7, rook f4. Very hard to escape the attack here. If the king decides to move away, you're going to see queen to g7 check, and queen takes f8, queen to c7, and black is going to be checkmated. I'm sorry, not queen e7. Sorry about that. Queen f7. And black is going to be checkmated very, very quickly here. So really what white was able to do in this case is pretty much shift everything away from the queen side, and white was able to focus primarily on the king side. Once his pieces got to these particular squares, he unleashed everything on the king side, and that is the way that white won the game. And that is typically, if white is going to win this game against this kind of opening, it's going to be on the king side for the most part. Black will be busy putting his pieces on the queen side, which means his king side is a little bit empty of pieces, empty of defense, and white can work towards taking advantage of that. And we're going to see more another example of that in one of the future videos. So now that we've seen two examples of the overall play that can arise from this opening, we can see that the battle lines in this opening are clearly drawn from the start, and an interesting fight always ensues between white and black here. Now, if you enjoy combative openings yourself, which have a lot of fun, interesting, imbalanced positions in them, if you don't like to draw, if you'd like to go for wins and get aggressive openings and battling positions, this is definitely an opening that I think you will enjoy. So be sure to check out the 3 other videos in this course, study the positions, learn from our discussion, and apply the tips, tricks, and advice in your own games, and I'm sure you'll get a better understanding of this opening and be better prepared to play with or against it in the future, in your future games. Now, in the next video, we're going to go more in depth on the possible plans for black and how you can get strong play in a variety of positions, primarily focusing on the queen side, and I'm sure that you will enjoy that next video as well. So I'll see you in that next video. I'll talk with you a bit later. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.